Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. New week, new theme. This week we're going to be looking at groovy tracks or songs with just a lot of groove in them. And today we have a song that, well, at least a couple of people have told me I've probably heard. So I'm going to go into this kind of assuming I might have heard it in general. Maybe it's been used in film or shopping centers or something, radio possibly. It is from 78 though. Well, somewhere between, oh man, somewhere between 78 and 91. Yeah, that's a pretty big gap. So possibly 78. So I don't know of any radio I would hear it on, but I don't know. Let's dive into this and see what's going on. We have Dire Straits, Sultans of Swing.
Shiver in the dark, it's raining in the park.
Yeah, so usually I associate groove with drum and bass. They're really holding down these quarter notes, and it's the guitar right here that's kind of providing that groove.
A band is blowing Dixie, double fall time. You feel alright when you hear the music ring.
Lots of harsh attack, a little bit of syncopation in those guitar lines. I love those little ornamental riffs between the vocal lines. I love the smile. Seeing performers enjoying what they're doing is phenomenal.
Way on down south. Way on down south, London town.
Alright, I recognize that riff right there.
Check out Guitar George.
It's interesting the bass got a little more movement in that last section.
Rhythm, he doesn't want to make it cry or sing. If any no guitar is all he can afford, when he gets up under the lights to play his thing. And Harry doesn't mind if he doesn't make the scene. He's got a daytime job, he's doing alright. He can play the honky-tonk like anything, saving it up Friday night with the Sultans, with the Sultans of Swing.
Yeah, nice little dotted notes that provide some syncopation on the second hits. Oh, the little hi-hat runs? Or ride? Might be the ride. Oh, those offbeat hi-hats, you're gonna bring it back? Yep. Yeah. Dig that. Yeah.
Good night. Now it's time to go home. Then he makes it fast with one more thing. We are the Sultans. We are the Sultans of Swing.
so interesting because we'll dig into the lyrics in a second. Fade out on a new melody line. Oh man. Okay, so I'm pretty sure I've spoken about my distaste for fade outs. Now, I have heard in the comments some people enjoy them and they've given reasons why they enjoy them, and I totally appreciate the perspective, right? I haven't come around to that side of writing yet, but I still view all tools in a toolbox as equal. It's just my personal bias, right? So, I guess the way to say it would be that critically, I view a fade out as a worthwhile tool that can be utilized well. Casually, very few situations I enjoy a fade out. It really has to fit thematically with the lyrics and what kind of narrative either the music or the lyrics themselves are telling, right? If it's, just off the top of my head, I think a good example of it is any song that is about a cyclical set of actions or a cyclical pattern with no end. By the end of the song, whatever's going on has not ceased to cycle back, so the song continues to go on seemingly ad infinitum because of this fade out. We didn't get to hear any resolution, we just continue to hear what's going on. So that's one situation where I typically enjoy it. This, though, takes it to another level where we introduce new ideas that sound phenomenal and we don't let them play out. I don't think there's any situation where I would enjoy this. Um, Again, I have to view it critically that it's a tool in the toolbox. They're utilizing it here, and I'm sure there's a good use for it somewhere. Well, I say good. There's a way that it can be used that I would enjoy it. But at least what I heard right here, it felt like we were really getting into a new section and the song begins to fade out. And that is just the worst kind of subversion of expectation out there. I'm expecting the song to keep going. I'm expecting to hear this new line that I'm just jamming with. And then they just cut it short in the middle of it. And just feels like a slap in the face, man. All right, I'm done with the rant. We're not going to rant about that anymore. There's a lot of awesome stuff going on in here. Let's be more positive. Let's get to a more positive section, and maybe I just won't talk about the ending. um. All right. So first of all, I was saying something about getting into the lyrics later, but I do want to point out it's very interesting. They call themselves the Sultans of Swing. I'm not sure if that was in reference to somebody in a story in the narrative or if that was in reference to them. They were the Sultans of Swing. But the song is not swinging the eighth notes. They're playing straight eighths. So I thought that was interesting. But I do, man, there's a lot of interesting things going on instrumentally here. But also, before I forget, because I really do want to point this out, this is not a rock band as we know it today, right? All the pieces that are there. We've got the guitars, we got the bass, we got the vocals, we got the drums. And I don't know that I would put any of this playing into another genre. However, it doesn't feel like rock to me. And I was trying to figure it out the whole time. The bass is doing some bassy stuff, playing one note every other beat to kind of lay down the chordal structure, the root notes. The one guitar is playing licks and kind of riffing around a little bit. Also kind of a rock thing. And the drums are basically being a metronome. There's a couple of ornamental things thrown in there, but for the most part, it's pretty much it's a metronome style of playing, just kind of keeping that rhythm, keeping that groove. Kind of very much a rock thing. So then I started to think about how they were doing all these jobs. And that's where it started to land for me. You know, when you think of a drummer, right? You think back to one of your best concert moments for a rock band or a metal band, and you look at your drummer, and this dude is just beating this drum kit up. All right? Like when he goes hit those cymbals, he's like these real big arm movements. He's just like hitting the snares like this. Really big movement with a lot of energy behind it. Then you look at this drummer, and he's very, very loose and relaxed, very small movements, right? It's jazz drumming. This is 100% jazz drumming. This is a big thing that I see whenever I watch videos of metal drummers trying to play jazz music or jazz drummers trying to play metal music. This is the one thing that I don't think translates very well. They may be able to pick up the rhythms or the intricacies of either or, but metal players tend to play jazz very loudly, very harshly, and jazz players might play the metal rhythms, the drum patterns, but it's not as percussive, it's not as bombastic. They don't have that energy. There's a massive muscle memory difference between the two styles of playing. And I'm not saying that people can't do it. It really is just about training yourself to be more restrained or more, more outbursty with your movement to get different velocities of attacks. But usually when I see somebody go over to the other side on their first or second attempt, they get the music down, but they miss the intensity. So yeah, right here though, we have a rock band playing more of a jazz drums with it, and it completely changes the vibe of the song. And I absolutely love that little attention to detail. Um, so yeah, like that was the first thing that popped out to me. Granted, I didn't figure out why, but the first thing that popped out to me was that this didn't feel like rock, despite everything being there. Every piece of the formula is there, but it doesn't feel like a rock song to me. Um, but yeah, just I really appreciate that little touch. I don't know if that's a Dire Straits thing. Maybe the drummer is a jazz drummer. Maybe rock drumming at this time hadn't reached those areas of bombasticity. That's not a word, but I'm coining it. Because, I think, I could be totally wrong here, but I kind of get the vibe that drumming had to get louder. One, to fit the growing intensity of rock and metal, it just kept getting heavier and heavier. But it also started getting louder and louder. We started pumping the amps up to 11, and drummers kind of had to play louder to be heard. So those are my two hypotheses about that. But yeah, for whatever reason, this drumming here is very jazz drummy, and I really appreciate that. I think it pairs well with the bass, because when I think about it from a jazz perspective, because jazz does have a sub rock genre, right? When I used to get sheet music in jazz class, it would usually tell, well, sometimes, not usually, sometimes it would tell what kind of genre it is, because, if you're given something like this, that would be closer to the rock genre, you don't want to be swinging your eighth notes, right? And if you're given a swing song, you don't want to be playing your eighth note straight. So it'll usually tell you, this is a samba, or this is, a bossa nova, or this is a swing, or this is a rock. Like, there's subgenres within jazz. And this is very close to jazz rock. Granted, there's a little bit more emphasis on little embellishing lines. If there's going to be a lead vocalist, the band is usually going to be a bit more subdued. But even we even see that though, right? When we get to the chorus section, which is where the famous riff starts, the bass actually picks up. The bass goes from playing a quarter note on beats 1 and 3. Yeah, I think it's 1 and 3. To getting these eighth note runs between, right? The drummer goes from playing, really emphasizing 1 and 3, I believe it is, with the snare, and some little embellishing ideas on the cymbals and the bass kick, really not a lot of movement going on, to switching it up to these eighth notes on the hi-hat or the ride cymbal, I think occasionally. And there's one part where he's even switching off between like two eighths on the ride and then a quarter on the crash, just to put a little bit of extra sizzle in their playing, and then come back to the ride, and like every 4 beats, go over to the crash and get that extra sizzle within the tinginess of the ride. There's more expression coming out when the vocals aren't happening. And even the idea of the call and response, with the vocalist taking, a bar to sing something, and then, well, he's also the guitarist in this in this song, but then the guitar getting a chance to do a little line as well. And we get this back and forth between the vocals and then this little lick, and then the vocals and then this lick. And it's probably common knowledge, but if you primarily have a rock or metal background, a lick is just a jazz term for a riff. Usually it's not repeated, it's more of a single idea, but it's that same concept where we're looking at a single idea in a vacuum. Um, so yeah, I mean that's also very jazzy, right? Usually the band will duck down a little bit, let the vocalist have their turn, and when the vocalist is done, the band will come back in. Or occasionally we get little stingers between lines in a verse or something like that. So yeah, this song actually has a lot of inspiration from jazz, and to me it's sort of a bridge between jazz rock and what would become rock, if that makes sense. It definitely kind of feels more like the former, but also is not entirely there. It also has elements that would evolve into what we see now. So I really dig that. Like I said, it's got this chill vibe behind it that just has more of I was gonna say like a jazz swinginess, like just kind of that jazz lounge music, in atmosphere, of course. Lounge music tends to be more passive, less ornamental. This actually has a lot of momentum in it, so I would not classify this as lounge music, but it has that atmosphere of lounge music where it's chill, laid back, just a couple of guys, playing some music. But that kind of takes us into the next section, which is, the atmosphere of this thing and the way that they're presenting these themes, right? It's a chill, laid back song, but that doesn't mean it's without momentum, especially once we get into some of the more chorusy areas where the drum and the bass pick up. But what's really cool is that even in the verse, which I think is the most subdued, muted section of the track, like I mentioned, the bass and drum are really only emphasizing 2 out of the 4 beats every bar, and there's really not a lot else going on in that area. It's just the lead singer and his guitar providing all the momentum. We have faster lyrics coming out than what everybody else is playing, and when the dude's not singing, he's playing these licks that are providing energy, providing momentum. And I kind of, man, I'm just gonna gush a lot about what this song's doing because it's so great. Something that I miss from jazz that I'm curious if actually pops up a lot in this era of rock, um, is this idea of new ornamentation. So, we mentioned that the vocalist and the guitar, they're the same person, but we're going to look at them as 2 separate ones. They have this back and forth idea going on where the vocalist will drop a couple of lines, and then the guitar will do a lick, and then the vocalist will do a couple of lines, and then the guitar will do a different lick. It's not part of a riff, right? There are 3 portions of static writing and then 1 portion of new writing at the end of this phrase every single time. So we have something that would be analogous to a riff, and that's the repeated part that happens in the first 75% of the phrase, but then at the very end, we get something new every time. And I kind of get the feeling that if somebody were to do something similar today, we would not hear a lot of um, new ideas developing on the end of this. In fact, something that kind of works well when we checked out black metal a couple weeks ago was that we heard something like this. A lot of black metal bands did pedal notes for the first three bars of a phrase, and the fourth bar would be a riff to sort of punctuate the end of the phrase. So we get the dun 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 da 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 dun 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 dun, right? So it's the same idea here. We have the repetition that sort of lays down the foundation, and then we have a punctuated lick at the end of it. Except in black metal, as we saw in a lot of those tracks, and kind of my understanding of most music, modern music that does this, granted, like I've mentioned before, there's a lot of music out there I haven't heard, but in my experience, they tend to be more static, including that final punctuated riff to close out the phrasing. This is something closer to jazz in which we would see more variety in what's going on there. And it's something that I sorely miss from, like I said, possibly this era of rock, but definitely jazz is the idea of new ornamentation, new licks to round off phrases. That's not to say that all jazz has this concept. There's definitely a lot of jazz that is loop based, that we could call riff based. There's a lot of standards where, I've talked about before that jazz follows the AABA song structure, where you have like a verse, which is sort of the part of the song that everybody knows. Your B is going to be your solo section. It can be as long as you want, and then you repeat that verse, that chorus, that main line that everybody knows to finish out the song. That's pretty standard. And the A's are going to be very loop-based, very riff-based. Everybody knows what they are. There really isn't a lot of space for ornamentation or improvisation in those sections. But this idea of taking this single phrase and having it be different every single repetition of it is just, that is right up my alley. That has that harkens back to my jazz roots. It is just phenomenal, and I love to hear it, especially in something like this, which I don't know how this was classified at the time, but to me it's pop rock, right? And of course it's not, right? It's classic rock or whatever its actual definition is going to be, but it is a rock sound that follows a popular song structure, right? And there's a lot of elements in here that I think would be very palatable, especially to a modern audience. This is not really rock as I think most people today would think of it. Especially if we're talking about, a mainstream audience that doesn't listen to rock specifically. And like I said, I love how they're this mainstream facing band, at least as far as, mainstream palatable band that's utilizing this element of constantly adding new ideas. It is, man, I just love it. I think I'm gonna have to move on because I'm running in circles, I feel right now. So this is Groove Week. We should be talking a little bit about the groove, and I had mentioned earlier that it's odd. I think it was Friday. I said when I mentioned we were going to be doing groove this week that I'm kind of expecting a lot of really strong bass lines and drum work. That to me is where the groove comes from. Again, being a jazz trumpet player, the groove comes from the rhythm section. The rhythm section is your bass, your drums, your guitar, your piano. And I think I said earlier, not all bands have pianos, and guitars tend to be lead instruments that take the place of what the rest of the jazz band would be. So when we talk about rock and metal, I'm kind of expecting a lot of strong groove elements in the bass and the drums. And here it's kind of the opposite. The bass and the drums are just rather static and rigid. Like I mentioned, they pretty much emphasize 2 beats per bar, and there's not a lot of interesting things going on outside of that. It's a lot of quarter note work in a majority of this track. The grooviness comes from the syncopated playing of the guitar, comes from the syncopated lines in the vocals, and syncopation is just a way to say interesting rhythmic work. or different rhythmic work. Something that's not syncopated would be da 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 da. That's not syncopated. That's just a bunch of quarter notes. But if you got da 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 something up, gent is actually a perfect example of syncopated playing. So it's just rhythmically interesting ideas. That's a layman's term for layman's definition for syncopation. But yeah, so we get some really interesting ideas here. Now, they're not swing ideas, which is still interesting. They're still using straight eighth notes, but the syncopation gives it this flow, gives it this groove, and I was actually having a real hard time determining if they were swinging their eighths or not because there's so many ideas of quarters and then an eighth note that feels like uh, swing eighths. And what swing eighths is it's just a heavier emphasis on the first eighth note. So if this is our metronome, doom, 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 straight eighths is going to be do, 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 do. Swing eighths is going to be do, 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 do. For all intents and purposes, it is closely related to a dotted eighth note followed by a 16th note. I don't think that's an exact approximation. Swing is more of a feel. I think it's difficult to write down, but that visualization of the first note being 150% and the second note being 50% kind of works well. And so we have kind of that. The dotted or the quarter note, or sometimes dotted quarter note, followed by the eighth note kind of sometimes feel like swung eighths because there's this heavy emphasis on the first note and then a quicker second note. But if I'm really paying attention to the eighth notes themselves, I don't think they're swinging. Now, it could be a tempo thing. I could be feeling this in a different tempo than they wrote it, in which case, in their eyes, it would be swing. But yeah, it's interesting because it has the vibe of swing. It feels like swing in a lot of places, but I don't think they're actually swinging their notes, which is just odd because I think the entire idea, it's an inception thing, right? The idea of swing has been implanted into my mind by the title. If the title was not called Sultans of Swing, I don't think I would even be paying attention to it. I'd say obviously the song is in straight eighths. I probably wouldn't even bring it up because there would be no reason to. But because they called it Sultans of Swing, I was paying attention to it, and it's interesting that they can achieve this feeling without doing it. Enough so that it confused me, that I had a lot of doubts even halfway into the song. Is it swing? Are they not swinging? So yeah, that's just really interesting. I think I'm going to dive into the lyrics here and see what I can pull from them, and then we're going to wrap this video up. Interesting. Okay, so there's a lot of cool things going on here. First of all, looks like it's from 78, not 81. Oh no, I did say 78. Never mind. We're fine. It is from 78. The lyrics, though, it seems to be linear, which is interesting because that means it doesn't have a chorus. It's just a bunch of verses. Even though I still call that main lick, the one that I was like, oh, that song, I still refer to that as the chorus section. So there's still this back and forth between the verse, or possibly two verses at a time. I don't know, there's six, and I don't remember there being six distinct sections. So it might be two verses at a time, and then this distinctive riff, right? That section right there where things get groovier. The bass gets some more lines, the drummer starts pulling in some eighth notes. This is the section that feels so distinct from the last, I have to give it its own name. So we're kind of going on an AAB, AAB, CA, which is we can actually condense those down just to A, B, A, B, C, A. So it follows the traditional song structure, but we don't repeat a verse at the end. We don't repeat a chorus at the end. We repeat a verse. So that's an interesting subversion on the idea, but it works well because it's storytelling. At least that's what it seems like to me, about walking around downtown possibly at night and hearing some awesome music and going into the building to check it out. And it's this jazz band called the Sultans of Swing, and just talking about how awesome they are. So yeah, at the end of the song, I mentioned I heard they said we are the Sultans of Swing. That was actually somebody in the story who said that. So that makes sense. Um, which kind of like brings it to another level because they're not the Sultans of Swing. They're not playing swing. I'm talking about Dire Straits here, but the song still feels swingy. So that's interesting. But yeah, I think the lightness of the track, like I said, it's a chill track. It's got a nice vibe to it. It's just kind of existing, but there's some playfulness to it, especially in those notes, the guitar licks that happen after or between technically the lyrics. It's a really chill vibe, and the song is chill. It's down to earth. There's nothing special about it. There's no um, what's that word I'm looking for? There's no tension. There's no uh action or anything. It's literally just walking down the street. You hear some noise coming from a building. You go check it out, and you enjoy what you hear. Like there's no conflict. That's the word I'm looking for. It's just a story about finding some good music. Unintentionally. It wasn't part of the plan. You just happened to hear it. And yeah, I don't know if the music itself really fits. I think I would have I would like these lyrics with more of a sultry jazz kind of thing going on. Even something like just some jazz piano and a singer. I mean, that's super cliche, I know, but yeah, I think that's just a really good storytelling duet right there, accompanying jazz piano with a very strong singer. But yeah, just like a nice chill vibe about a nice chill evening. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think they nailed it. This is where you guys come in though. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed this one or not. If you have anything you want to add, let me know if you think I'm wrong about anything, if you think I'm right, if you have things to add on top of what I said, or if you heard something that I didn't. Go ahead and drop those comments down there. Above the comment section is a description box, and in there is a link for Linktree. It'll take you to this menu right here, which has links for everything related to the channel. You can support the channel through Patreon and get the ability to vote on future themes and songs. You can pick up some merch. You can join the Discord, follow me on Twitter, email me, check out the music I've been making. I don't know, there's a bunch of stuff in there. Go ahead and check it out. Above the description box, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I'd greatly appreciate all three of those. Let's see. Oh, geez. We went over the 30-minute mark. I was not expecting that. It's a 4-minute song. Today's special selection is already out. It's a Cardiacs track. By this point, I'm pretty sure most of you know if you like Cardiacs or not, and if you're interested in that or not. But it's there. We're checking out Cardiacs today and tomorrow, I think, on special selection. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC. We'll be looking at more groovy music. All right, until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.